Alright, so today we're talking about something that tends to drive fans up a wall these past few years, myself included. That's something being brand synergy in comics. Now, I can hear those of you who don't overanalyze this stuff like I do asking, Major Disaster, what the
Brag.
is that thing you just said? And to that I say, shush, I'm getting there. Don't interrupt. So, it's a lot more complex than this, but the extremely abridged way of putting it is that brand synergy, at least when it comes to comics, is basically when a new movie or show or what have you comes out and the comics are changed to better fit what general audiences are seeing on screen. Most of the time these changes feel forced and really stupid, like that time Spider-Man mutated into a giant spider monster, died, and gave birth to himself just so he could get organic webs. Can you guess what was relevant at the time? But anyway, you know us fans aren't particularly fond of change, but some of these changes can actually be really beneficial. Let's take a look at a few of these characters who were positively impacted by brand synergy. So before we get into the realm of character reinventions, I'd like to give a couple honorable mentions who skirt the line of what I'm referring to but don't quite hit the mark. First, Harley Quinn. While I can't say her character was changed to capitalize on other media, we do owe her entire comic history to her popularity on Batman the Animated Series. There are a few similar examples like Livewire and Lockup, but she's by far the most successful. One other minor mention I think is interesting is Daredevil's costume. His first major media appearance was in the Trial of the Incredible Hulk TV movie with nary a horn or double D's in sight. Pretty lame costume overall, but clearly Frank Miller thought it was interesting enough to be the inspiration for the suit Matt would wear in his Man Without Fear miniseries, and now it's commonly accepted to be his starter suit in both the comics and also TV. Ironically bringing it full circle. But anyway, let's get to the list proper, shall we? Alright, so first up, Iron Man. This one's a bit of a cheat since there wasn't that much that needed improving for the majority of his history up to that point. So when the first Iron Man movie came out, the comic iteration was in a bit of an unfortunate spot. This was right off the heels of Civil War and World War Hulk, where Tony had gone full fascist. He was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Superhuman Registration was in full effect. And he had no qualms throwing colleagues in extra-dimensional prisons without trial, or shooting them off into space without their consent. Oh, and he was a member of the superhero Illuminati. Seriously. So needless to say, Marvel needed to do some damage control if they wanted people to like this character. And writing him to be like the quippy, arrogant but charismatic Robert Downey Jr. version new fans just saw in theaters was the easy and sensible option. They even changed the armor to look more like the MCU, which I think is a shame because I love Extremis, it's the best look he's ever had in my opinion. Bleeding Edge is cool and all, but it doesn't quite measure up in my opinion. When it comes to if he's a better character overall by behaving like MCU Tony, your mileage may vary, but it's definitely an improvement over the straight up fascist supervillain he became in Civil War, even if I highly prefer how he's characterized in the 90s and early 2000s. Batman the Animated Series is nearly universally considered the best Bat-aptation to date and one of the best superhero shows ever made, in large part due to being faithful to the spirit of the characters while also knowing what to change. Case in point, Mr. Freeze. Interestingly, this isn't the first time he's been changed of whatever show was on. His name itself was a change made by the Adam West show, where he was originally named Mr. Zero, which is another change for the better. Mr. Freeze is just a cooler name. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about, so let's break the ice. In the comics up to this point, Freeze was seen as a joke villain comparable to the likes of Polka Dot Man or Penny Plunderer, just another Silver Age idiot with a gimmick who only exists to get his ice kicked by Batman. All that changed in the 1992 episode Heart of Ice, presenting Freeze as a desperate husband trying to find a cure for his wife's condition. And he'll do it come hail or high water. This was such a chilling take, it not only won the episode multiple awards, but it was so universally loved that it's now the definitive approach for the character. Not only in future adaptations, but the comics themselves. He's no longer just a thug robbing banks with a freeze ray, he's a desperate scientist willing to do anything for his wife. And not only that, but his design got a major glow up, going from gaudy spandex and a space helmet to a full-on containment suit. I see why it's so beloved. How many more puns can I fit in this section? Absolutely zero. Now, if I asked you to name Marvel's first major hit when it came to movies, I imagine some would say Iron Man since that kicked off the MCU, or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, or even X-Men. But how many of you guys remember the first Blade movie? Blade is a character who probably wouldn't have been my first pick if I was in charge of Marvel and needed a big hit, and he wasn't exactly cool in the comics at the time. Nothing particularly wrong with him, but he's just a dude with an afro and a green jacket. Not exactly exciting blockbuster movie material. So for the upcoming movie, they got to work to make him cool, casting Wesley Snipes and trading out the hair and green jacket for black tactical gear, a trench coat, and constantly wearing sunglasses. And Blade is quite possibly the only character who makes wearing shades at night look awesome. It didn't just stop at his appearance though. His backstory was also changed to being a Dampier, or the Daywalker as he's known as. This push to shift the character to be more in line with the movie began before it even came out, with his media debut in Spider-Man the Animated Series being based off an early screenplay, being the love child of a vampire father and human mother. So yeah, the movies were a major hit, and this modern revamp is what everyone thinks of when they think Blade. The gun-toting, trench-coat-wearing, half-man, half-vampire, and it really is a net positive here. Not to say creator Marv Wolfman's original pitch was bad by any means, but he's legitimately cool now, and it's always a treat when he shows up. You guys seem to like Green Lantern, so let's talk Green Lantern. None of them really received any major revamps in the media they've appeared in, save for Jon Stewart in the DCAU. Up until this point, Jon was really only known for two things: being Hal Jordan's understudy and blowing up a planet. Later blowing up Mogo since just one wasn't enough. But anyway, when he showed up as a main character in Justice League and its sequel show Justice League Unlimited, Dini and company opted to throw out his background as an architect in favor of giving him a career in the US Marine Corps instead, giving him a much more stoic and serious demeanor that demands respect, but not to the point where he's completely incapable of having fun. This proved to be a wildly popular take, as this show is the reason so many people consider Jon their Green Lantern. And DC made sure to take notes and capitalize on the new generation of fans and made quick work to work it into the comics. At first it was fairly subtle, making him the main lantern of their Justice League comics, and shortly after even started drawing him, specifically his hairstyle, to look more like he did in the DCAU. Strangely, it did take quite a while for his Marine background to be quietly retconned into his comic history. A fleeting mention in the Alpha Lantern storyline, which really wouldn't be expanded upon until Blackest Night of all things, cementing it as his defining character trait from here on out. Alright, last but not least, Miles Morales is something of an interesting case study prior to starring in his own movie. For those of you either not in the loop at the time or too young to remember, there was actually quite a lot of backlash directed at Miles the moment he showed up. Both because Peter fans were livid that he was killed off just to be immediately replaced by this kid, and for bad faith reasons, we'll say. But I had my own problems with the character at the time, even as a 12-year-old who didn't look into writing that much. That is to say, he wasn't unlikable, and the writing wasn't horrid, but there just wasn't much there. Miles is a nice kid, but there's really very little differentiating him from Peter. Very similar personality, but with none of the personal problems that makes the Spider-Man so compelling. He's got two loving parents who can pay their bills no problem, goes to a good school for gifted kids. He isn't bullied or particularly ostracized in any way, has loyal friends like Genki to support him. And this isn't to say every Spider-Man's life needs to be constantly miserable, but there just wasn't much to latch on to outside of typical superhero stuff. Despite these issues, Miles proved to be wildly popular pretty much right off the bat, appearing outside of comics as quickly as his costume being available in games a mere 2 months after his first appearance, culminating in being the own star of his own movie in 2018. Phil Lord and Chris Miller seemed to be aware of his shortcomings as a character and really revitalized Miles in fixing all the criticisms I had. Whereas Peter was a social outcast, Miles is quite sociable, outgoing, and loves his community. He's got this passion for art and music, which is massively refreshing. He's just vibing and living his best life. Which not only carried over to the comics, but also other adaptations, with Insomniac Miles being something of a hybrid between the two, the movie version and the comics, the gifted genius and the sociable music lover. Now Miles truly has his own voice and sticks out as a character. Now just give him some unique villains that aren't just hand-me-downs from Peter and he's all set. Alright, so there you have it. 5 characters changed by brand synergy for the better. Let me know if there are any other examples I may have missed, or if my takes are dumb and I should feel bad about it. I still don't have an official intro, so peace out.